I say you people, I mean it horribly offensively. She was against the repeal of Glass-Steagall. Yeah. A real deal, Holyfield politician we can trust. And more importantly, now she is running for a Senate seat, which upon her victory would make her the first openly gay member of the United States Senate. So please, a warm, loving Netroots Nation welcome for Tammy Baldwin. Come on up, Congresswoman Baldwin.
The Netroots community for inviting me into your big political family. And I also want to thank you for all you do to give voice to our values. And in particular, on behalf of progressives across the state of Wisconsin, I want you to know how grateful we are for your doing just that for my home state over the last year. I'm sure, yeah, give yourselves a hand. Giving voice to our values. I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to know that people in every corner of the state of Wisconsin are pretty engaged in our democracy right now. And as progressives, we think that's a good thing. But I come here today with a heavy heart, but with renewed resolve. I come here to remind all of us that our fight for the middle class in America didn't end with the recall election in Wisconsin. Our fight taking on corporate special interests in Washington goes on. And tonight, just think of this, tonight, the corporate special interests in Washington, D.C. are giving each other high fives on K Street because they think you have been divided and conquered. They think you will give up on our fight for the middle class. And I know, and you know, they couldn't be more wrong. The state of Wisconsin is defined by our state motto, forward. It's the foundation of our proud progressive tradition, and it's the Wisconsin way, taking on powerful interests who hold way too much sway in Washington. It harkens back to the days of fighting Bob LaFollette Sr. at the turn of the last century. And it is a fight that I will take on as a U.S. Senator, and tonight I ask you to join my fight. Shortly after I was first elected to the Congress back in 1998, both parties supported deregulation of the financial industry, and it was wrong. So along with Russ Feingold, I stood up as a proud Wisconsin progressive and voted against this deregulation for Wall Street and the big banks. I was one of just a handful of members of Congress who voted no on repealing the Glass-Steagall Act, which had been in place since the Great Depression and had kept banks from engaging in risky practices. Letting Wall Street banks write their own rules proved devastating to our economy. For nearly 10 years, Wall Street ran wild. The results, the 2008 financial meltdown. And the middle class shouldered the burden. The burden of plummeting home values, massive foreclosures, and the steep job losses. It's no wonder that people have had enough of a political system where corporate special interests always win and the middle class can't even get a fair shake. Far too often, Washington isn't giving voice to the everyday struggles and sacrifices that Wisconsinites and many other Americans are making just to get by every day. These stories of struggle and sacrifice are the same wherever I travel in the state. Jobs shipped overseas, stagnant wages, dwindling retirement savings, rising healthcare costs, and the rising cost of college tuition. And Wisconsinites see congressional Republicans in Washington who are more concerned with giving tax cuts to multimillionaires, like several of my opponents, instead of asking everyone to pay their fair share. They see congressional Republicans who are more concerned with debating birth control and turning back the clock on women's health and economic issues, just as they did this week when they blocked the Paycheck Fairness Act. And people have the right to feel disconnected and the right to say they've had enough with political gamesmanship in Washington. I've had enough too, because it's simply wrong. My opponents in this fight for U.S. Senate are no different from the Washington Republicans that they seek to join. And we need to let people know that. Mark Newman, Tommy Thompson, Eric Tufte, Jeff Fitzgerald are all running in a Wisconsin Republican primary for U.S. Senate. And you know what? It really doesn't matter which one the Tea Party picks. But it does matter that we tell the voters what they intend to do. They will put the wealthy, the corporations, and the big banks ahead of hardworking families in the middle class. I don't believe that a middle-class family in Wisconsin should be paying a larger share of their income in taxes than millionaires, like millionaire hedge fund banker who's one of my opponents, Eric Tufte. That's why I've helped lead the fight in Washington and introduce the Buffett rule in the House of Representatives, partnering with Sheldon Whitehouse in the Senate to make sure everybody does and pays their fair share. We're in this together. When the Justice Department was moving towards cutting a sweetheart deal for big banks to give them immunity from prosecution for mortgage fraud, I stood up and said that the days of Washington looking out for the interests of Wall Street must come to an end. And I was proud to work with Eric Schneiderman on that effort. And we won that round, and the banks did not get blanket immunity, and they had to pay billions to begin to make their victims whole. I am not afraid to take on Wall Street, and I will take that fight to the United States Senate. Now, what will my opponents fight for? They support Paul Ryan's budget plan, which would end Medicare as we know it for future generations while giving tax breaks to millionaires like themselves. I grew up with Wisconsin values and a very different understanding of American exceptionalism. Some of you may know I was raised by my grandparents, and that experience taught me at a very young age the value of Medicare and Social Security. As progressives, let's be clear, on Social Security we are committed to protecting it, not privatizing it. And on Medicare, we are committed to strengthening it, not ending it as we know it. Now just this week, one of my prospective opponents, Tommy Thompson, went to a Tea Party event and compared Medicare to welfare and said he wanted to, quote, do away with Medicare. Do away with something the middle class has worked for, has paid for, and has earned. This coming from someone who ran Medicare for George W. Bush and then joined one of Washington's most influential law firms as a $1 million a year consultant, lobbying on behalf of drug companies and insurance companies. This from someone who cashed in and has been paid millions for sitting on dozens of corporate boards that he continues to join even as he runs for United States Senate. This is wrong, and I'm going to say it's wrong in this election. from my opponents talks about future generations. But let's be clear. They support reducing our nation's deficit by trying to shift the burden to the middle-class families, to seniors, and to those in our society who are struggling the most. None of them will fight for future generations because none of them care about building a future with a strong middle class at its foundation. None of them will fight the special deals for drug companies and insurance companies. None of them will fight against the big banks or against Wall Street. They won't stand up to Washington's powerful interests, but I will. So I need your help. As you know, we are in a fight with shadowy opponents who have been enabled by Citizens United. Last week, the Koch brothers, Karl Rove, and their right-wing friends pledged to spend $1 billion to make sure corporations hold on to their power and influence over Washington and our entire political process. That is why the work you do as catalysts for advancing progressive causes is so vitally important. And I want you to know that I am standing with you in this fight, and that I hope you will stand with me. So I have a small favor to ask. Take out your smartphone or your tablet right now and send an email with your contact information to my campaign, netroots@tammybaldwin.com. That's netroots@tammybaldwin.com. We want to partner with each and every one of you, and I hope that you'll work closely with my campaign team between now and November 6th, because we all know what's at stake. In my own election, the choice is clear, as it is in so many places across this country. A choice between a middle class who gets a fair shake, or a country where only the powerful few get ahead. So I ask you today to renew our commitment to this fight for our future. I ask you to renew our commitment to our fight for fairness. And I ask you to take this fight forward through November and beyond. Thank you so much.
Tammy, 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 Tammy.
Our United States Senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse.
Well, good evening, and welcome to Rhode Island. I am very, very proud to have such a strong showing of passionate and innovative activists and thinkers here in my home state for the 5th annual Netroots Nation Conference. I have been looking forward to this, and I know Mayor Angel Taveras is as excited as I am, as are Governor Chafee and my colleagues in Congress, Senator Jack Reed, Congressman Jim Langevin, and Congressman David Cicilline. Special thanks to our Rhode Island bloggers and online organizers for lending your voices and welcoming your colleagues from around the country. Logistics. This weekend, please share your favorite Rhode Island experiences using the hashtag NN12RI. My staff and I will retweet some of the best ones. I hope you'll keep up with me during Netroots Nation on Twitter at Sen Whitehouse, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Senator Whitehouse. Some special events we've got planned this weekend. Tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m., I'm hosting a panel with Cap Action on the effects of Citizens United. We'll be taking some of those questions via Twitter with the hashtag CitizensAsk, so don't miss it. And tomorrow night, Mayor Taveras and I are hosting a Welcome to Providence block party at 8 p.m. at Local 121. And ecologically, culturally, and agriculturally sustainable restaurant located in an affordable live-in workspace for artists at 121 Washington Street. Join us there for a pint. And Saturday, do not miss a special Providence tradition, our water fire. A spectacular display of fire on Providence's rivers. It is not to be missed. And this week's water fire is in special honor of Netroots Nation at Water Place Park at sunset. And since our progressive values include giving back to our communities, we've organized a day of service on Sunday. Don't spend the whole conference online. Come out on Sunday and help us in service in Providence's beautiful Roger Williams Park. You will have fun and you will feel great about it. So enough logistics. Netroots Nation brings us together to reconnect with the American dream. The American dream that hard work, in school and on the job, pays off. That the next generation will have a better life than the previous one. The story of the American 20th century is one of the American dream gradually being extended to more and more people. But today, many Americans feel not so much. People here in Rhode Island who worked hard throughout their entire lives are struggling to keep their homes. Families watch bills pile up while their wages remain stagnant. And folks who've never been unemployed in their lives can't find a decent job no matter how hard they look. Americans see incomes of the top 1% of earners grow by 11.6% just in 2010, while incomes for the other 99% grew only by 0.2%. That means that 1% captured 93% of the income gains in the first year of this recovery. America has always promised a straight deal where everybody plays by the same fair rules. But I hear from folks that the rules of the economic game seem increasingly rigged to advantage the well-connected and to disadvantage regular families. So we have this mission together. If we're going to rebuild the middle class, we need to make our economy and our government work for everyone again. What does that mean? Well, the Bible says, hold fast that which is good. We must hold fast to Social Security, to Medicare, and to Pell Grants. These are pillars of American freedom, pillars of American prosperity, and pillars of American economic security. There's always going to be pressure. Wall Street wants to get its hands onto Social Security. The insurance industry wants to get its hands onto Medicare. Big Republican interests will always seek to privatize both programs. And in Congress, we've fought off multiple attempts to cut Pell Grants. Well, a political leader once said, one ought not to be obstinate unless one ought to be. And then one ought to be unshakable. On Social Security, on Medicare benefits, and on Pell Grants, progressives should be unshakable. Second, we need to roll back the special tax rates and loopholes that help billionaires and big corporations and that leave out regular people who don't have their special influence. The IRS reports that the 400 highest income earners in America, earning an average of $200 million each, paid an average of 20% in taxes in 2009. That's the same rate a single Rhode Island firefighter pays on a salary of $50,000. I am working with Tammy Baldwin to pass the Buffett Rule Bill, named after investor Warren Buffett, who agrees with me that it is irresponsible to allow super high income earners to pay lower tax rates than middle class Americans. This bill would ensure that multi-million-dollar earners who who are supposed to be paying a 35% marginal tax rate, actually pay at least a tax rate of 30%. Do you think that's too much to ask?
No.
Does that seem to be too much to ask?
No.
Well, a majority of the United States Senate agreed with you in a recent vote, but the Buffett rule was nevertheless derailed by Republican filibuster. We lost that round, but it was round one, and I will keep fighting for a tax system that gives regular Americans a straight deal. Third, these big banks should not have free rein to make outsized bets with taxpayer-insured money, all while they roll back basic consumer protections for regular Americans. That deal led to an economic collapse that crippled our economy. JP Morgan Chase recently revealed its loss of more than $2 billion on the same kind of complex, risky trades that were at the center of the economic meltdown of 2008. And our banking regulators have yet to implement the rule to separate core, federally insured consumer banking from these hedge fund-like trading activities that leave taxpayers exposed. The big banks and their credit card subsidiaries also take advantage of a loophole that allows them to ignore the laws of a consumer's home state and charge regular folks sky-high interest rates, illegal under the home state's law, while they themselves get near zero interest rates from the Fed. We have a long way to go before we can say that our banking system gives that straight deal to middle-class families. Fourth is the environment. Our planet is warming. Asthma rates among children, directly linked to coal plant pollutants in the air, are at all-time highs. Unfortunately, polluters emit propaganda as well as pollution, and they've been emitting too darn much of both lately. We just broke through the 400 parts per million barrier. While extremists on the right deny there's a problem by rejecting science entirely, and polluters fund phony front organizations to manufacture doubt. That's why I go to the floor of the Senate every week to make sure the truth is told about the threats to our environment and why your voices are so important too. Last, and maybe worst in this great and historic democracy of ours, is the unlimited, anonymous corporate money now flooding our elections. With Citizens United, the conservative bloc of the Supreme Court struck down key protections of our American elections integrity, overturning decades of precedent and the will both of Congress and of the American people. It is no secret that special interests have long had too much influence in the legislative and executive branches. Citizens United means that influence now threatens to overrun our very elections. Super PACs have become the evil twins of candidates' campaigns. Unlike candidates' campaigns, they can accept unlimited corporate cash. Unlike candidates' campaigns, they hide the identities of their funders. And unlike candidates' campaigns, they can run vicious, negative campaign ads without anyone being accountable. As the anonymous communications director for the Definitely Not Coordinating with Stephen Colbert Super PAC recently tweeted, "Thank you all for your donations. We promise to put that money to good use, or at the very least, use." Our last defense, friends, against that tidal wave of money from special interests is disclosure. Help me fight for passage of the Disclose Act so every citizen can know who is spending those fortunes to gain special influence. In a brief I recently filed against Citizens United with Senator John McCain, we said, America's democracy has long stood as a model to the world. I stand with you in defending the integrity of America's elections, which have long been not just the bulwark of our democracy, but a beacon to other nations around the world. And if the court won't revisit its misguided Citizens United decision, let's amend the Constitution. In all of these contests, we must be prepared for the spin and propaganda that engulfs us, not just in elections, but in policy making at all levels of government. Progressives must be alert to call out the fraud. Our conservative friends love to roll out sensible sounding ideas. Balance the national budget. Scrap obsolete and burdensome regulations. Who could be against things like that? But then they hide some pretty awful stuff in there behind the curtain. Pull back the curtain marked "cut the deficit," and what do you see? Eliminating Medicare as we know it. Pull back the curtain marked "regulatory reform," and what do you see? Gutting the Clean Air Act. Behind the curtain of spin and propaganda is some nasty stuff. As this year's campaign season heats up, we face choices that will determine the direction of our nation. This November, voters will decide whether they want to elect a president and members of Congress who put the values and well-being of American working families first, or for politicians who seek to stack the deck ever more in favor of the winners. The big corporations want to take over Social Security, Medicare, even our elections. The Republicans want to help them. They're hoping that with enough spin and propaganda, they can get away with it. But you, the online opinion makers who make Netroots Nation so great, with your blogs, your email lists, your Facebook pages, your tweets, and your videos, you can fight back against this tide of money, of spin, of extremism. You can help make sure that this remains our great democracy of, by, and for the people. Thank you very, very much, and have a wonderful time in Providence.